In 4 minutes, Mr. Kerr.
Presiding Officer, listening to many speeches from the SNP benches, you'd hardly imagine they've been in power for 15 years. These are not problems that have arrived in the last few weeks or months. These are problems that we've been dealing with and living with in Scotland for a long time. So after 15 years in power, I think Emma Harper has actually highlighted the inadequacies of our own government, because she highlights also the powers that local authorities have got and don't have, and therefore there is a role here for the Scottish Government. I think Paul Sweeney gave a marvellous speech, actually, in highlighting the need for the Government to be more imaginative and more flexible in how they deal with these things. Can I also say to Jackie Nobbart, I'm actually delighted to hear there's a Brian Adam Road. Absolutely delighted to hear that. And I was astonished, but not entirely surprised, must be honest, to hear the Minister say that the person to blame for all of the problems that we're talking about in this debate is Mrs Thatcher. My goodness me, how predictable and how lame was that. We live in one of the most beautiful countries in the world. In fact, we regularly in Scotland are acclaimed as the most beautiful country in the world. And our landscape is something that makes all of us feel proud. Something inside of us warms up when we see the beautiful scenes that our country is renowned for around the world. As parliamentarians, I believe that we've been appointed by our fellow Scots to be guardians of Scotland's natural beauty. And just as previous generations have preserved our nation's landscape so that we could enjoy it, we also have a responsibility to conserve the beauty of our built environment so future generations can enjoy it as well. But let's not be kidding ourselves. When we talk about the beauty of Scotland, let's not be kidding ourselves. Every fibre of Scotland is not beautiful. I wish I could say it was. And as has been mentioned in the speeches that have already been delivered, there are many parts of our country where land is not only unused, but it's an eyesore. And failure to address the problem is nothing short of a levelling down approach. There is such a thing as entropy. It's real. And the kind of neglect from public bodies, agencies and councils, as well as owners, comes from an uncaring attitude that says to people that their environment, their lives, their well-being is less important than others. And the way that many places in central Scotland have been neglected is Scotland's shame, where policy makers who live in nice, pleasant suburban areas are happy to leave their fellow Scots in the worst kind of squalor. So rather than accepting the status quo, the Scottish Government should be embracing a true levelling up agenda, empowering people, empowering authorities, building buildings that are the complement to our country's natural beauty. And as already known, we don't have enough houses in Scotland. And for far too long, we've not been building enough homes. Councils and governments take too long selling off unused land. There's a whole register of land that is in the public sector that could be usefully utilised to build more homes. And having been declared surplus of requirements by councils, buildings, as we've heard already in this debate, take far too long to sell. We have not been imaginative enough, for example, to adapt buildings on our high streets to accommodate housing. Why do we just keep talking about this without doing something about it?
Colin Smith.
Would the member take an intervention at that point? Thanks. Does Mr Kerr not accept, though, that the point he's making is very valid, but one of the disincentives when it comes to investing in regenerating a building in a town centre, say for housing, is the fact that the level of VAT that's levied on existing buildings is actually higher than the VAT level on a new build on out of towns. That's a perverse disincentive to actually tackle the problem of housing. Maybe he can have a word with his party and to see if we can address that and actually reduce the level of VAT on regenerating existing buildings to the same level as on new builds.
Stephen Kerr.
Look, and I'm happy to address any of the perverse illogicalities that exist around the need for us to take action on the areas that I'm highlighting and other members have highlighted in this debate. Because what we are seeing here, if I may coin a phrase, is a collection that one might call the anti-growth coalition, the people that are stopping these things from happening. And we cannot just champion more housing, by the way. We must build housing, and I think Paul Sweeney touched on this. We must build more housing that promotes community, rather than living inside our own bubble, which is happening too often in what we used to have as communities in a country that was proud of its sense of community and should be proud of its sense of community. We must champion energy-efficient housing, so these buildings serve us for generations to come, and we must champion the right type of housing. We must champion beautiful houses that people want to live in beautiful neighbourhoods. Beauty should be at the heart of public discourse. It should be part of our conversation about housing and development and spaces. As the great philosopher Roger Scruton put it, We are losing beauty, and there is a danger that with it we will lose the meaning of life. And I close with the words of a friend of mine, Sir John Hayes, not of this parish, but of the House of Commons, someone whose ideas are driven by an inordinate sense of common sense. He said, "Sadly, we live in an age that is dull and utilitarian, in which mystery and magic are extraordinarily unfashionable. It is odd that that should be, for it was not true for most of our history, and has not been so for most great civilizations. It is unusual to be as utilitarian as we are, but now it is time for a change, for a renaissance. It is time for beauty to be put back at the heart of government policy." And Sir John Hayes is right, and we can start by tackling the dereliction that we see all too much of around us.
Thank you.